showered all around. Brethren, see poor sinners round you slumbering on the brink of woe. Death is coming, hell is moving. Can you bear to let them go? See our fathers and our mothers and our children sinking down. Brethren, pray, and holy manna will be showered all around. On the last, let us love our God. Let us love our God supremely. Let us love each other too. Let us love and pray for sinners still. Our God makes all things new. Then He'll call us home to heaven. At His table we'll sit down. Christ will gird Himself and serve us with sweet manna all around.
Well, it's certainly good to see all of you here tonight. As we begin our service, we want to give a praise this evening for Pastor George and Naomi's great-granddaughter, Madeline. We've been praying for her for some time, little 2-year-old that had some pretty severe health issues, and she was in church this morning looking just fine. So we certainly appreciate that. On another note, it was a sad morning. We want to pray for Wayne and Margie Stafford. Wayne's son, Mark, age 52, died this morning about 11 o'clock. So certainly good to have Wayne and Margie here with us tonight. Be praying for them, and I know that they would appreciate that. So a couple of requests to keep on our minds tonight. Let's look to the Lord in prayer. Jerry, if you would please, sir. Amen. You may be seated.
I tried to sing this song last week, but I guess the ladies weren't ready, but I think we're ready today. I Run to Christ. We started singing it last week, but newer song. It's not in your songbooks. The words will be up on the screen. Some of you may have heard this, a great song for when we are going through the things of life. We should run to Christ when chased by fear, when warned by life, and when stalked by sin. So the words will be on the screen. We'll sing all 3 verses. I run to Christ. I run to Christ when chased by fear, and find a refuge sure. Believe in me, His voice I hear, His words and wounds secure. I run to Christ when torn by grief, and find abundant peace. I too had tears, He gently speaks, thus joy and sorrow meet. I run to Christ when worn by life, and find my soul refreshed. Come unto me, He calls through strife, fatigue gives way to rest. I run to Christ when vexed by hell, and find a mighty arm. The devil flees sees, the scriptures tell, he roars but cannot harm. I run to Christ when stalked by sin, and find a sure escape. Deliver me, I cry to him. Temptation yields to grace. I run to Christ when plagued by shame, and find my one defense. I bore God's wrath, he pleads my case, my advocate and friend. Amen. Great singing.
All right, thank you, Ben. So good to see all of you out this evening. Just by way of announcements before Jack comes with our missions letter, reminder of all of the things going on this week. Ladies and men's prayer time, fellas Tuesday morning at 8:30, ladies Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, and Wednesday we will have our regular activities. And as again we talked about this morning, we're doing a DVD series on Wednesday night featuring Ken Ham and a program he's put together called Foundations, and very, very applicable to the world we see today. And so I would encourage you to be here for that on Wednesday night. We'll have a time of discussion afterwards, and so we'd certainly encourage you to be here for that. And then on Thursday night, we are having a 4-week series on the book of Philippians, and so it's back in Bob Carsey's room Thursday night at 7 o'clock, and if you can make that, that would be great. But the biggest activity is tomorrow night. We're going to have our trunk or treat, and if you are bringing a trunk with some candy in it, be here about 4:30, and we'll get you all set up, and we're going to have lots of extra candy. We've got some donuts and cookies and cider and coffee, and again, if you can bring some cookies and help us out with that, that would be great. And then don't forget, next Sunday morning we are having our Veterans Day service, and we hope to have something special planned for that morning. So we certainly want to do our best to honor our veterans, so we hope you'll be here for that on the 6th. And then on the 20th, which is a Sunday before Thanksgiving, we will have our annual Thanksgiving breakfast during the Sunday school hour, but it's also going to be a different kind of Thanksgiving service because we are inviting the state police and the Genesee County Police and the Flint Township Police and the local fire department and first responders for that breakfast, and we want to have a special civil servant appreciation day, the morning worship service. So we will be paying honor to those folks. So that's what's going to happen on Thanksgiving Sunday. We're pretty excited, or the Sunday before Thanksgiving, we're pretty excited about that. Just in case you are wondering, Christmas this year, if you don't already know, is on a Sunday. And what we will do is we will have one service that day at 11 o'clock. There will be no Sunday school, there will be no evening service, but we will have a Christmas Day worship service at 11 o'clock. So if you can tell Santa Claus that's what your plans are, that you'll be at church at 11, but then you'll be back home, we should be good. So I think that's it as far as announcements go. Jack, if you would.
I know who plays Santa Claus. I get to watch it every night. Gloria likes to watch Santa Claus too, so I see Tim Allen, so you see him. This is from the Smiths, who are missionaries to Canada, Ottawa, Canada, and this is what they have to say. The question that we are asked the most these days is, how do you like Canada? The other common questions that we get are, where are you from? And did you leave the States because of the upcoming elections? As obvious by the second question, we're still working on our Canadian English. As for the third question, we have some open opportunities to tell people why we really moved from the States to preach and spread the good news of Jesus Christ. As for the first question, we are excited to be here in the city that the Lord has directed us to. We're especially blessed to have a wonderful church, Carlton Baptist, to get started with here in the city. The pastors and people have welcomed us graciously, and we have plenty of opportunities to serve the Lord. We like the house and neighborhood we are renting. We have met most of our neighbors when our children play in the driveway and street. We have 2 feet of grass on either side of the house. The backyard has more space, but the kids usually play out front. We are learning our way around, and this greater Ottawa area is our new home. Moving to a first world country. I have been reminded how complicated first world living is. Much of the time over the last 3 months has been spent just getting life started here in Canada. Imagine losing all of the cards in your wallet and losing all the documents in your file cabinet. We have been working to get everything from driver's licenses to renter's insurance, and about the time that we think we are getting ahead, we learn of some other legal obligation or life necessity. In our last letter, I explained briefly that our vehicles could not be imported and that we would have to return them and look for another vehicle. Praise the Lord that the matter was resolved fairly quickly. Our Michigan vehicles sold quickly in Michigan, and the first vehicle sale that we seriously pursued here in Ontario went quickly. Thank you for praying about this. Here's some prayer requests for the ministry list below. Our children are in school. We are still looking for a French tutor. We are looking for a tutor that will come to our home and teach our whole family, for ongoing paperwork and details for us to get settled here. Our current ministry responsibilities and opportunities for prayer: Saturday church setup, Saturday door hangers and evangelism follow-up, singing in the choir, teaching midweek Bible study, that's Jeff, teen and college activities upcoming, retirement home services, home visits with pastor, coffee and fellowship with the ladies, that's Kim. Kim speaking for ladies' meetings in November. And this is from the Smith family who were in Ottawa. So let's remember this family, and they need to learn French, and many of our missionaries are in the process of learning the language of the country they've called them to. Men, if you want to come forward. Let's pray. Father, thanks again for today. Thank you for the blessings that you bestow upon us, Father. Thank you for the message this morning that touched my heart as well. I pray for the Smiths, Father, that you would just meet some special needs that they have from getting all the situation of lost cards and paperwork, Father. Help them in that situation. I pray that you'll allow a tutor that would come to the house, Father, and be able to teach the whole family as they're in the process of learning the French language. Pray that you'll use this family in a special way. Be with all our missionaries, Father. Pray that you'll watch over them, meet their needs, and keep them in good health, Father. And those that need to learn the language of the country they're in as well, pray that you'll help them in that area. Now, Father, I pray that you'll bless this offering. I pray, Father, that you use it to bring honor and glory to your name. For your name we pray. Amen.
I'd like to thank Julie and you for dealing with me as I enjoy learning new songs, and so I trust you like that too. This song that you heard Julie play and that you saw the words on the screen, we're actually going to have the pastors and their wife, they want to come up, and we're going to sing the first verse for you, and then we're going to have you stand and join us on the next two. And so this song was written by Jonathan Hamilton, the son actually of Ron Hamilton, Patch the Pirate, some of you might know him, and written by his son before he passed away, and talking about God's sovereignty and God's rule over us. And it ends with, though my eyes can't see, help my heart believe you are always only good. So I trust as we sing this, you'll be blessed, and then also I'm going to have you stand with us after the first verse and join on the next two.
Looking back, I can see your fingerprints upon my life, always seeking my best. There were times when your way would make no sense, but as you said, you have never left. You are always good, you are only good, you are always good to me. Though my eyes can see, how my heart believe, you are always only good.
Let's go ahead and stand. We're going to sing the next two verses. The words will be up on the screen. We'll start with the second verse, looking in, and then the last verse, looking up. So we're going to sing these next two verses. Looking in, I can see my frailty, my sin is great. On the second verse. Looking in, I can see my frailty, my sin is great, and my strength is so small. Still you stay, and your mercy shelters me. You hold my hand, and you hear my call. You are always good, you are only good, you are always good to me. Though my eyes can see, help my heart believe, you are always only good. Looking up, I can see your sympathy. I doubt myself, but I'm sure of your love. Lavish grace was poured out at Calvary, securing me for our home above. You are always good, you are only good, you are always good to me. Though my eyes can't see, help my heart believe, you are always only good. Amen. Great singing. You may be seated.
Okay, first things first. Who's warm? Anybody warm? Okay, who's cold? Never mind. Let's go to the book of Job, if you will. Job chapter 1. We're going to look into this book for a little bit, see what we can understand. The book of Job was not just written about for us to feel for a man who had everything and lost it all. Neither was the book of Job written for us to learn that through proper living we can get it all back. I believe the book of Job was written so that we might be able to learn patience in our trials, learn how to trust in God when we'd rather be angry with God, and learn how we can help others through their trials. So let's look here at just the first few verses of Job chapter 1, starting in verse 1. The Bible says, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed or shunned evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and a very great household. So that this man was the greatest of all the men of the east. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, that is referring to their birthdays. And they sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings, according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned, and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. I wonder if he thought his daughters sinned, but he certainly thought his sons might sin. Look at verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made a hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord, and there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job, and said, The oxen were plowing, and the asses feeding beside them. And the Sabaeans fell upon them, and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, The fire of God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep, and thy servants, and consumed them. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, The Chaldeans made out 3 bands, and fell upon the camels, and have carried them away. Yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, Thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house. And it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Then Job arose, rent his mantle, and shaved his head, and fell down upon the ground, and worshipped. And said, Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. So we want to start out this evening just looking at 2 points regarding this unbelievable man named Job. We're going to look, first of all, at his prosperity, then we're going to look at his adversity. And if we look at his prosperity, we can see it in about 4 different categories. First of all, we see his character in verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, one that feared God and eschewed evil. That is an unbelievable testimony for any man, is it not? And that's one that every one of us should strive to have. He was perfect, he was upright, he was not sinless, because nobody can make that claim, but he was complete and mature as far as his character and conduct. And this word perfect here in the Hebrew, I think, is actually referring to the integrity of this man Job. And in the face of all of his friends' accusations, in the face of God's silence during such a long time, Job maintained his maturity and his integrity, and the Lord ultimately vindicated him. We know that, to me, the foundation of Job's character is where it says that he feared God. And when you look at the end of this chapter, in all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Now, what does that mean, charged God foolishly? What? Blame? You know, I think I might have said, in the face of all this, I might have said, God, what in the world's going on? To me, that's charging God foolishly. And Job here lost everything. Think about this for a second. He lost everything except his wife and his integrity. Unbelievable. Can you imagine? It must have been a freak circumstance when the first messenger comes. And then no sooner is he done talking than here comes the second one. Can you imagine what Job must have been thinking when the third one came, and then when the fourth messenger came? But in all of this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. We talked about the fact here, what I think is key and integral to his testimony is the fact that he feared the Lord. What does it mean to fear the Lord? It means to respect who he is, what he says, what he does. It's not the relationship of a slave cringing before his master, but it's more of a relationship with a child to a loving parent. It is a respect that brings about obedience. When we talk about the fear of the Lord, many of you know the name Oswald Chambers. He made this statement. The remarkable thing about fearing God is that when you fear God, you fear nothing else. Whereas if you do not fear God, you fear everything else. So we see Job's prosperity here in his character. He was perfect, he was upright, he feared the Lord, and he eschewed evil. We also see Job's prosperity in his family. We see that in Job chapter 1 and verse 2. There were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. Now this whole incident involving Job's life, we have to understand the chronological order of the Bible. They're not written in or placed in chronological order. Actually, the book of Job is one of the oldest books in all of Scripture. And this book was written during what's called the patriarchal age, where it was considered a blessing of God if you had a large family. And the children here, the seven girls, I think, and the 3 boys, did I get that right? Other way around? Yeah, 7 sons, 3 daughters. They must have enjoyed each other's company. And I think that speaks well of the relationship they had with each other. I think it speaks well of the way that they were brought up by their parents. And what's interesting here is this passage tells us that there was not a man like Job in all the East. He was something, right? He was something else. Now that could cause some lesser men to get a little prideful and to think, look at me. He might start to believe his own press. He might start to think that his kids are infallible, that they're incapable of error. But what we see here is that at each birthday celebration, when all the kids got together, what did Job do afterwards? It was almost like a tradition. He gave an offering to the Lord. Because he said, I want to make sure that my children don't sin against God. I always want to be bringing them before the Lord. Folks, that's something we as parents ought to be doing on a daily basis, is bringing our kids, bringing our grandkids before the Lord. Why did Job do this? It was because he was a very religious, devout, pious man who wanted to make sure that his family was right with God. So when we see Job's prosperity here, we see it in his character, we see it in his family, we also see it in his material possessions. Look back at verse 3. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 she-asses, a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men in the East. Back in these days, wealth was certainly measured by the money you had, the land you had, and the livestock that you had. And Job had an amazing abundance of all 3. But being rich did not turn him away from God. He acknowledged in verse 21 where he got it all from. The Lord gave. And so he did not allow his wealth to turn him away from God. And he also used, if you read in Job chapter 4 and if you read in Job chapter 29, that Job took care of lots of folks with the gifts that God had given to him. So we see his prosperity in his character, in his family, in his possessions, and believe it or not, we even see it in his friends. Look at Job 2 and verse 11. Job chapter 2, and look at the first sentence of verse 11. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place. And here we're introduced to Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. For they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. Now we know that these 3 characters, and we're going to learn more about them as we go on, these friends hurt Job deeply. They wronged him greatly. Just the other day we talked about in Job chapter 19 and verse 2 when we were talking about the power of our words and how they can lift up or tear down. Job looked at his friends in chapter 19 and verse 2 and they were giving him all this advice, and he said, "Your words are ripping me apart." With friends like that, who needs enemies? Right? But Job says here, God's word says, these were his friends. They made an appointment. Somehow they just, either they sent servants to one and servants to the other saying, we need to go be with Job. But what we do know is that they traveled a fairly good distance when they heard about Job's calamity. They wanted to be there for their friend. And we also know, Scripture tells us, as we will read later on, that these 3 fellows, believe it or not, had the ability for a while to sit there in complete silence and sympathize with Job while he was mourning over all of this. It's amazing because if you look at the book of Job, and I think there's some 42 chapters if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there, the majority of this whole book is about Job's friends giving him bad advice, giving him wrong counsel. The problem with these 3 friends of Job is that they felt the need. Now get this. This whole book is about them giving wrong advice to a man who feared the Lord, was upright, and eschewed evil. And they felt the need, some reason, to go to Job and say, now Job, we love you, but let me tell you where you went wrong. You got friends like that? Let me tell you where you went wrong. Let me tell you what you did wrong. Let me tell you what your first mistake was. And they felt that was their responsibility. Throughout most of this book, to say, Job, this is where you messed up. This is how you need to fix it. This is why all of this happened. Ultimately, at the end of the book, they were all reconciled as friends. But for a fleeting moment, these 3 friends were able to sit there in complete silence with Job while he mourned and while he wept and while he pondered over everything that had just happened in one day. You ever had friends like that? They know what you're going through. And they may say, I'm not here to say anything. You know, think about this. If you were a pastor, if you were Job's pastor, and he calls you up after this day and says, preacher, I need to talk to you, what would you say? What would you say to a perfect Christian, mature man who feared God, hated evil, and all of this has happened? What would you say? I wouldn't have a clue what to say. And for a brief moment, these 3 just sat there and basically said, Job, we just want to be here with you. We just want to be here and support you. And so we see here point number 1, Job's prosperity. We see it in his character, we see it in his family, we see it in his material possessions, and we see it in his friends. But now let's look at Job's adversity. In one day, he was stripped of virtually everything that he owned and his children. One after another, 4 frightened messengers came to tell Job that, first of all, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, 3,000 camels were stolen in enemy raids. Now think about that. It's not like they loaded them up on trucks or ships, right? They didn't take 4,000 animals, which is not a small number, and throw them up on a train. This had to take some planning and some doing on somebody's part. And we're going to talk about whose part that was in just a little bit. But then we find out 7,000 sheep were struck by lightning and killed. That must be one big bolt of lightning. Or some really big sheep, right? All 10 of his children killed in a windstorm. Job knew what had happened, but he didn't know why it happened. But here's the scary thing. Look at Job 1 and verse 12. The devil is in heaven, giving God what for in verse 10. Hast thou not made a hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. The devil says, But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. Look at what God says. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy what? Power. God knows how much power the devil has. And he says here to Job, you can unleash your power on my servant. Did you ever think about that? Where did that lightning come from that killed the sheep? We're talking creation here, right? Odds are we're talking lightning. So we're talking creation. God gave the devil power of creation to control it. Think about this for a second. It just didn't happen to be that the devil looked at the local weather forecast and said, oh, the weatherman says lightning's coming. The devil conjured up lightning to kill 7,000 sheep. Not only that, how did Job's 10 children die? A windstorm. Guess who had the power to Now get this. Think about this for a second. Lightning isn't geographically covering the whole world at one time, is it not? It is very secluded. You've got a lightning storm here and a lightning storm there. Tornadoes happen here and tornadoes happen there. But do you think it's coincidental that it just so happened after the devil had a conversation with God that all of a sudden, right where Job's livestock are located, there's lightning enough to kill 7,000 animals? Folks, don't think for a second that the devil doesn't have power. And then on top of that, in the same day, the devil conjures up some sort of a tornado to destroy the house. That house, Job's family's house. What are the odds? Folks, we need to get a very strong, sober understanding of how much power the devil has. And God said here in verse 12, it's within thy power. Job knew what happened. He didn't know why it happened. This was the crux of the matter. And thankfully for you and I, the author of this book allows us to visit the throne room of heaven. And here we see this conversation between God and Satan. And so we know who it was that caused all of this destruction. We know why he allowed to cause it. But folks, if we didn't have that insight, then we would probably take the same approach as Job's friends and blame Job for this tragedy. So, when we look at Job's adversity, we see several truths here. First of all, and not the least of which, is that God is sovereign in all things. He's on the throne in heaven. The angels obey him. The devil has to obey him, even though he doesn't want to. Creation obeys him. And the devil can't do anything to God's people without God's permission. Second truth is this, and this is one that we don't think about very often. And that is the fact that the devil, right now, is somewhere in Michigan. you ever think about that? The devil right now could be in this church. We get this mistaken notion that the devil is confined into some innermost part of the earth where it's really, really hot and it's dark and there's a lot of fire going, and he's up there going poof, 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 and making things happen. Folks, the devil's here in our very lives. 1 Peter 5:8 does not say the devil is pinned up in hell. What does it say? He's a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. Guess what? We're not in hell. Folks, I don't want to scare you, but the devil follows you on a daily basis because he is seeking to destroy you. He is not pinned up in hell. Revelation 20 and verse 10 says that's not going to happen. The devil in hell will not be thrown into the lake of fire until the final judgment. He is roaming the earth, seeking somebody in this church that he can devour. He is allowed entrance into heaven. He is allowed an audience before the very throne of God. That is some scary stuff to me. Third truth. God found no fault with Job. Look at chapter 1 and verse 8. The Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there's none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God, one that escheweth evil? The word Satan means adversary. It's one who opposes. This is a courtroom scene. This conversation between God and the devil. It is a courtroom scene, and each deliver a different verdict. God says, my servant Job is perfect. He fears me. He eschews, he hates evil. There was nothing about Job that compelled God to cause him to suffer for some reason. There was no great sin in Job's life that God was dealing with. God looked at the devil and said, Job's innocent. Look at verse 9. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? The devil said he's guilty. Why? Because he is always the accuser of God's people. Do you know, I don't know that there's ever been a time when the devil stood before the Lord and said, you know, that Christian's doing a pretty good job. You got a good one there. The devil never, ever has anything good to say about God's people. He will always be the accuser. And he looks here and he says, nope, Job's guilty. The devil finds nothing good in God's people. And when we think about this, the devil was going after Job, right? But this was actually, it wasn't an assault on Job. This was an all-out assault on God. It's nothing more, nothing less. It was an all-out attack on God. Job's three friends, they all said that he was suffering because he had sinned, and that wasn't true. And then we're introduced to another fellow down the road. His name is Elihu. And he says, well, Job, the reason you're suffering is because God's chastening you because he loves you and he wants to prepare you for something. Now, that could have been partly true. But I think the fundamental reason for Job's suffering was to go against these blasphemous accusations that the devil was making, and for God to prove that a Christian who loves God, fears God, is perfect, spiritually mature, hates evil. A Christian like that can have everything taken from them even in a matter of one day, and can and will stand by God. That takes some kind of testimony. So we can now better understand perhaps why Job was so unyielding in the advice of his friends and resisting it. You know, they wanted him to repent of his sins so that God would forgive him and that he could go on with life. And Job said, I'm not about to make up something I haven't done. Job didn't think he was perfect. Nowhere does it say that. But Job was a smart enough man to say, look, I'm not going to apologize for something I didn't do. And that's what these three friends of his wanted him to do. What Job didn't understand, and if you go to Ephesians chapter 6, you will see that this was a battle in the heavenlies. This was a spiritual battle between God and Satan. It just so happened that Job was the object of this trial. And so if Job would have, okay, I'm going to confess to some sin, he would have been playing right into the hands of the devil himself. And so what did Job do instead? He held fast to his integrity. He blessed God even though he didn't understand what God was doing. And the amazing thing is, God used it for Job's good and God's glory. And he loves to do that. He can even take satanic attacks against us and use it for our benefit and God's glory. Think about Peter. The Lord says, Peter, the devil's going to have you for a while so that he can sift you as wheat, and I'm going to allow it. But then, when the devil's finished, I'm going to use you in miraculous ways. And so, God knows when you and I are being challenged by the devil. God knows when he has given some power to the devil to come after Christians. And God says, I will use that for their good and for my glory. And so, I believe there are some things that we may not understand. Why these things happen to us, we may not understand until we get to heaven and talk to God personally. But until that time happens, we can do our best to be like Job, one that is perfect, upright, fears God, and eschews evil. And even in the midst of our trials and our circumstances, we can say just as Job did, naked came I out of my mother's womb, naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. What a tremendous testimony if you and I could be tried by the devil and all his power and still sing, God is so good. Wouldn't that be something? Listen to me, folks. If being perfect and upright and fearing God and eschewing evil were easy, we'd all have our own verses in the Bible, wouldn't we? We'd all be doing it. And so when we come to the trials of life and when we see that the devil may be attacking us with his power, and please understand the devil has great power, not as great as God's, but he has great power where he could actually control nature. Either that or he went to God and said, God, this is what I want you to do to Job. Make it happen. Because God had already laid the parameters, didn't he? You can have at him, but you can't touch him. Then he said, you can touch him, but you can't kill him. So maybe the devil looked at God and said, this is what I want you to do. Or the devil has unbelievable power. I believe both can happen. And I think we need to be very, very careful when we walk out these doors, because there is an enemy, not stuck in hell, but he's roaming this earth, seeking whom he may devour. May God help us to have a testimony like Job. Father, we thank you for our time together. Lord, I pray as we begin this series on this man, Job, we know that he was not sinless. We know that throughout this book we'll see where he got a little upset sometimes. He got a little frustrated sometimes. He got to the point where he wished he wouldn't have been born. He got mad at his friends. He questioned you. But on this day, this particular day, when he was tried by the devil, your word says he sinned not, nor did he charge God foolishly. Father, we may not know why things happen to us. We may not know why things happen in our lives. But we know you are a perfect, righteous, holy God who loves us more than anything and only wants what's best for us. And so, God, I pray during our trials that we would be able to look towards heaven and say, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." God, I pray that we'll enjoy our time in this study. We thank you for your word. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, Ben?
As we close, let's sing song number 552, My Jesus, I Love Thee, I Know Thou Art Mine. Let's stand as we sing 552, My Jesus, I Love Thee. My Jesus, I love Thee, I know Thou art mine. For Thee all the follies of sin I resign. My gracious Redeemer, my Savior art Thou. If ever I love Thee, my Jesus, 'tis now.
All right. Folks, could I ask you to be seated for just a second? I think we've got a couple of fellas. Lynn, if you would. Jerry.
On behalf of the congregation, I would like to thank the three of you for your leadership and dedication to North Baptist Church. We appreciate you very much, and as a token of that appreciation, we have some gifts and cards that we would like to present to you at this time.
That's probably for me too, and can't find the name on it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I want to remind you that we have refreshments in the gymnasium immediately following this, and Jerry will close us in prayer and give the blessing on the refreshments.